Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the scent of Felisa, wash processed Guatemala from Wes Ngopi. And there's the bag right there. And Wes Ngopi, based out of Shah, Malaysia. And they're a coffee roaster that's appeared on this channel quite a bit over the last couple of years, including our recent review of the Thagini, a natural processed Kenyan coffee. And in that review, I mentioned that we did pick up a number of coffees from Wes Ngopi, including this one right here. Now, the main catalyst for purchasing this coffee is actually the opposite of what we usually do when purchasing coffees. So a lot of the coffees that we have reviewed from Wes Ngopi have been some very interesting sounding coffees, with stuff ranging from Bolivian Geshas to Costa Rican Mejorados. But the reason we picked out this coffee is because it is the complete opposite, as this is essentially a multi-varietal wash-processed Guatemalan coffee, which is about as boring sounding of a coffee as there is out there, and we definitely wanted to try something that was a little bit more of a standard offering from them as well. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how this one turned out, as this right here is day 54. And recipe we went with for this coffee was a toned down one at a 15:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 93 degrees Celsius, about 199 degrees Fahrenheit. I like this one best through the Chemex, which does indicate a more medium grind. Roast profile for this coffee. In our recent review of the Thagini, we mentioned that their coffees didn't turn out quite as light as we'd experienced from them in the past. There has been a little bit of inconsistency with the profile that we've experienced from Wes Ngopi over the last couple of years, and while I wouldn't necessarily say that this is as developed as some of the experiences we had with them, I would say in early January, I would say that it is still not necessarily quite as light as a lot of the experiences that we did have from them last year. So we'll still align this one with being on the more medium light side of things by most standards and metrics. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 30, first impression, through the V60, and it was off to a strange start, as there was an undefined generic Central American quality to it, as it was a bit more robust than expected. That's what I'm continuing to highlight with the profile of these Wes Ngopi coffees. A slight bit of a faint honey and fruit quality, but the coffee was also offering a very strange first impression. Now, it is worth noting, in the same way that the Thagini was hindered by the Finca Lord Voldemort, I do believe each and every one of these Wes Ngopi coffees that we worked on that day were also hindered by that, because I would try all of those coffees, or all of these coffees, through the same mug that I tried the Finca Lord Voldemort. And that Finca Lord Voldemort really seemed to hinder so many of the coffees that we were trying that day. So I do think that's what happened with this one. But we'll go ahead and move on to day 34, as we opted for the Chemex. And the coffee was significantly better this time, offering a cleaner, less robust experience with a bit more of the traditional Central American feel of nuttiness, honey, and chocolate, with traces of peach characteristics as well. A little bit of citrus, but better overall. And this is kind of what I was expecting from this coffee, was it to have that more traditional base to it, and just kind of hints of fruit characteristics, which is usually what I expect from Central American coffees for the most part. Day 37, through the UFO brewer. And the coffee is better again, as it's starting to seem like the first experience was definitely an anomaly, as it's essentially a boring washed Guatemalan coffee. We have boring washed Qatura and boring washed Ethiopia, but why not boring washed Guatemalan coffee, as it has the traditional Central American qualities, again with a bit of a floral honey quality as well. A little bit of citric brightness, but for the most part, it's just a classic profile. And one thing that's kind of interesting, especially given that we do have our Cafe Box Advent calendar coming up, it's actually sitting right over there right now. I have noticed that a lot of the Central American coffees that are lighter profiled, I really seem to enjoy those more. Those stand out a lot in those type of blind taste test videos. So when they're well executed, I really do tend to enjoy those coffees. And we're actually in the process of working on one that I feel like aligns with that pretty well. Day 39, through the B60 with some lower extraction adjustments, and the coffee is most in line with the expectations that we did have for this coffee, as it's the most traditional it has been to this point, with a heightened focus on the chocolate and nutty qualities of it, especially in regards to the base. Less of the fruit characteristics of this coffee though, so mixed impressions I would say, but much more in line with what I thought this coffee was going to be. Day 42 through the Chemex with the same adjustments, and the coffee strangely does act quite different between these two brew methods, as honestly I would expect them to be pretty similar. However, the traditional characteristics are presented in a, we'll say, less intense sense, allowing for a better presentation of the fruit characteristics in line with the listed yuzu, as there's just a little bit of a sour lemon characteristic to it. and more of a citric and softer peach quality to go alongside that traditional base. So that's one of the main reasons why I did seem to prefer this brew method for this coffee. Go ahead and move on to day 45 as we opted for the V60 with some higher extraction adjustments, so 17-1 at 99 Celsius. And we mentioned in the tahini review that I had no success pushing any of these coffees, and this one was certainly no exception, as it seemed to accentuate a lot more of the Central American qualities of it with less of the fruit characteristics. This time it was a little bit more earthy, a little bit more robust, which continues to go along with the profile that we experienced from this coffee, so by no means one of the better days, definitely least impressive that we had had up to this point. Day 48, use a Chemex with lower extraction adjustments, and the coffee was back to being at its best, as this allows for just better depth to this coffee with those subtle fruit characteristics, and that definitely seemed to help, and it's why we opted for it on our final day at day 50 the Chemex, as there has been consistency with the lower extraction adjustments, especially based off of the brew method that we go with. V60 being just a little bit more chocolate nutty forward, and then the Chemex having those same characteristics, however just a bit more of a fruit depth to it. Best characteristics we can align with this one include a chocolate, hazelnut, honey base with a bit of a vanilla sugar sweetness, traces of citrus, and a lemon and stone fruit peach, all of which in a pretty balanced sense, as this coffee, as you're going to see here shortly, was just pretty balanced overall. All right, so let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. Ah yes, that is a boring looking tasting wheel, just the way I hoped it would be. Let's go ahead and go through this one, and we'll go ahead and start with the cleanliness, level 4. That's what you're going to expect from a multi-varietal wash-processed Guatemalan coffee. If it's not scoring a level 4 for cleanliness, then something usually went horribly wrong, but in the case of this coffee, it's clean, it's well-defined, and a lot of the characteristics in this one are just pretty either subtle or well-balanced overall. So level 4, where we opted to put that, pretty straightforward. Finish, level 4. I do really appreciate the way that the finish does linger in this coffee, largely because it has that sugary, more candy bar-like sense to it, and that definitely did seem to help. There were times it reminded me of various candy bars, Snickers, Milky Way, which is fully what I was expecting from this coffee. So level 4 in that sense. We will go ahead and move on to the sweetness, level 4. A lot of sugary characteristics to it, especially given that there is that heightened nutty chocolate quality to it. So level 4, where we opted to put that. Let's go ahead and move on to level 3s, as we have quite a few of them. Acidity, level 3. There is just a slight bit of a citric brightness to it, which is enough to put it there at that level 3 mark, but by no means as bright as what you would usually expect from, obviously, your Kenyan coffees or even more processed coffees. Florality, level 3. I mentioned that there is a little bit of a vanilla sugar characteristic, a little bit of a honey characteristic, both of which do present in that slightly floral sense, so that's why we opted to put it there at that medium level. Citrus fruit, level 3. Same thing with that. There is a little bit of a subtle citric characteristic to this one. They do have that yuzu note list on here, which you can certainly see. That does add to a little bit of the brightness of this coffee. Stone fruit, level 3. Can see slight traces of peach, by no means an overly pronounced peachiness to this one. Chocolate and caramel, level 3. Those traditional characteristics at play, we might as well go ahead and say the savoriness there at the level 3, which is the nutty qualities of this coffee as well. So all three of those things are stuff that I was fully expecting going into this one, and then experiencing it, I would say, a little bit more the more we worked on this coffee. Definitely did seem to validate my expectations. And then the final thing we're discussing, the body, level 3. Pretty quick discussion on this tasting wheel, largely because it's just very straightforward. Definitely plenty of texture, even with it being brewed on the on the Chemex. It still had a little bit more body overall. Fully expected. Again, we have a Central American coffee. So as I am looking at this tasting wheel, I do think it is a boring but pretty good representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. It is kind of funny that when I brought this coffee to Airworks and I was offering samples, I said to him, I've got something exciting. It is a standard, boring, wash-processed Guatemalan coffee. And Airworks got really excited and said that they really wanted to try this coffee because we live in a time where something like this is maybe often overlooked, because you go to a coffee roaster's website and you see all of these things. You see these wild co-ferments, or you see these experimental processed coffees, or you see these unique varietal combinations with origins, and you see these really high-end geshes. And Oftentimes something like this can be overlooked, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to pick out this coffee. This coffee is just very safe. It was never going to be my favorite coffee out there, but at the same time, it was probably not going to be a coffee that I was going to be disappointed with whatsoever. I want to say low ceiling, high floor. That's exactly the way that this coffee turned out to be, and as a result, I'm happy with it. I don't really have too much to add to it, largely because it's a lot of what you'd expect. It's a Central American coffee with a nice clean base to it, a much more traditional base, and just some subtle traces of fruits. So that's basically this coffee in a nutshell. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, just that specific profile. So if you like your more traditional Central American coffees without too much of an exciting quality or characteristic to it, other than just, a nice balanced sugariness, a nice balanced cleanliness, a more moderate to even brightness, and some subtle traces of fruits to go along with the traditional chocolate candy bar sort of base, and that's what this coffee is, and it'll be very safe throughout the entirety of the time that you're working with it. So that's just kind of the best direction I can point somebody towards on this one, and also the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to hear your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Santa Felisa, wash processed Guatemala from Wes Ngopi. Thank you for watching.